There is a moment, and if you have neuropathy, you already know it, when you look down at your own foot and realize you can't remember the last time you actually felt it. Not the burning, not the tingling. I mean truly felt it, the way you feel the floor under your bare feet when you get out of bed in the morning. That moment is not random. It is not just how neuropathy is. It is a signal. And in 35 years of clinical practice, with the last several years spent working with nothing but peripheral neuropathy patients, I have learned that the human body does not fail silently. It warns you first. It always warns you first. The problem is that almost nobody tells patients what those warnings actually look like. So today, I am going to hand you something most doctors never will. The exact 7 signs I personally look for when I need to know whether a patient's neuropathy has quietly moved into a more dangerous stage. And I need you to hear this clearly. Some of these 7 signs have nothing to do with pain at all. Those are the ones that scare me the most as a clinician, because they are the ones patients dismiss, ignore, or simply never notice until real damage has already been done. By the end of this video, you will know exactly where you stand. You will know which signs mean keep watching, and which ones mean call a specialist this week, not next month. Stay until the end, because sign 4 and sign 5 are what I privately call the danger zone. And I promise you, most patients have never once been warned about them. Let's start with something almost everyone gets wrong. The myth of worse neuropathy. When someone tells me their neuropathy is getting worse, they almost always mean one thing: more burning, more stabbing, more tingling. That is the assumption nearly every patient walks in with. But here's the truth nobody explains to them. Pain intensity is a terrible way to measure how far neuropathy has actually progressed. Nerve damage moves along a very specific biological route, almost like a chain reaction moving through your body. First, it targets the sensory nerves. That's your burning, your numbness, your pins and needles. Then, if it continues, it begins to affect the nerves responsible for something most people have never even heard of: proprioception, your body's built-in GPS system that tells your brain exactly where your feet are in space without you having to look. After that, in more advanced cases, the autonomic nerves get pulled in, the ones quietly regulating your circulation, your sweating, your temperature control. And in the most severe cases, the motor nerves themselves become involved, and that is when actual physical weakness begins. Each one of those stages leaves fingerprints, distinct, identifiable warning signs. And the ones that matter most, the ones I want you to walk away remembering, often have absolutely nothing to do with how much pain you're in that day. Here are the 7. Sign 1. The numbness is climbing. The single clearest marker I use to confirm progression is simple. Is the numbness moving upward on your leg? Here's why this happens. Peripheral neuropathy is what we call length dependent. It attacks your longest nerves first, and the longest nerves in your body happen to run all the way down to your toes. That is why neuropathy almost always begins in the feet. As the condition advances, the damage doesn't stay put. It creeps upward, the sole of the foot, then the top, then past the ankle, slowly climbing toward the knee. In clinical terms, we call this a stocking pattern, because it spreads exactly like a stocking being pulled up the leg. Now, some numbness in the feet is expected and stable for years in many patients. What I am watching for is change. If 2 years ago your numbness stayed below your toes, and today it sits firmly above your ankle, that is not a fluctuation. That is progression, plain and simple. Speed matters too. Numbness that has slowly crept upward over several years tells a very different story than numbness that jumps significantly in a matter of weeks. The faster it moves, the more urgent the evaluation needs to be. If your numbness has climbed past your ankle, write that down right now. That's sign 1, and it is the strongest single indicator of confirmed progression that I know of. Sign 2, when the pain never turns off. The second sign isn't about how intense your pain is. It's about whether it ever fully switches off. In earlier stages, neuropathy pain tend to be episodic, burning, sharp, tingling sensations that come and go, with real breaks in between, stretches where you barely notice anything at all. But as the condition advances, something shifts. The pain stops taking breaks. It becomes a constant hum in the background of your life. It may rise and fall in intensity throughout the day, but it never truly disappears. That shift from pain that comes and goes to pain that simply never leaves tells me something specific is happening. Central sensitization. In plain language, your brain's own pain processing system has started rewiring itself in response to the constant signals coming from damaged nerves. Imagine a volume dial that used to reset to zero, but now gets stuck permanently turned up. What makes this sign tricky is that patients adapt to it without realizing. They stop noticing that the pain-free windows have quietly disappeared, and they start treating this new baseline as normal. So ask yourself honestly, do you still get real breaks from your pain the way you used to? Or has that break slowly vanished over time? If it's gone, that's worth flagging immediately. Sign 3, the one that surprises everyone. This is the sign that catches most patients off guard, and it carries a real physical safety risk. Your body has a sense most people never think about: proprioception, its ability to know exactly where your feet are without looking. Every single step you take relies on your nervous system constantly reporting that information back to your brain. When the nerve fibers responsible for that sense get damaged, the result isn't more pain. The result is instability. Here's what that actually looks like day to day: a shuffling walk, especially on uneven ground, needing to look down constantly to feel steady on stairs or a curb, reaching for a wall or a countertop more often than you used to. Near falls, the kind where you catch yourself just in time, heart pounding. Here is a critical part. This sign exists completely independent of your pain level. I have treated patients with relatively mild pain and serious balance problems, and patients in significant pain with a perfectly steady gait. Pain tells me nothing about balance. They are two entirely separate measurements. This matters enormously because a fall at this stage of life is rarely a minor event. A single fall-related injury can set someone back for months, sometimes permanently. If your balance or your walking pattern has changed, even if your pain hasn't gotten dramatically worse, that is not a watch and wait situation. That belongs in front of a specialist. Before we move into what I call the danger zone, signs 4 and 5, if this kind of detailed clinical breakdown is useful to you, stay subscribed, because the next video in this series goes even deeper, and it's one you will not want to miss. Sign 4, the wound you never felt forming. We are now entering the danger zone, the two signs that, in my clinical experience, actually change a patient's medical risk profile. Sign 4, wounds that don't hurt and wounds that won't heal. There's a specific clinical term for this: loss of protective sensation. It describes a point where a person can no longer reliably feel an injury to their own foot, a blister forming, a small cut, a pressure sore rubbing against the inside of a shoe. The body's built-in alarm system has effectively gone silent. Here's why that's dangerous. Normally, pain protects you. Step on something sharp, it hurts, and that pain forces you to stop, look, and treat the wound immediately. When that signal disappears, a small injury can begin and grow without you ever noticing, becoming contaminated, worsening, spreading, simply because nothing is telling you to check. For patients living with diabetes, this exact mechanism is behind one of the most serious and most preventable complications in diabetic care, the neuropathic foot ulcer. But make no mistake, this danger is not limited to diabetic neuropathy. Any patient with significant sensory loss faces the same risk. Watch for this: wounds you never noticed forming until they were already serious, blisters that grew large before you ever spotted them, calluses or pressure marks that appeared with zero awareness on your part. Here is what I tell every single patient with advanced neuropathy: daily foot inspection. Every day, both feet, every surface, including between the toes. This is standard clinical guidance. And yet, honestly, it's something the vast majority of patients have never once been told to do. If wounds are forming without your knowledge, or healing slower than they should, that conversation with a medical professional needs to happen now, not later. Sign 5, the danger you can't feel coming. Sign 5 often gets lumped in with general numbness, but it deserves its own spotlight because it is one of the earliest and most underrated warning signs there is. The ability to sense hot and cold is carried by a very specific group of small nerve fibers. These fibers are frequently among the very first ones affected in small fiber neuropathy, and they're often damaged early in diabetic neuropathy as well. Here's a simple test. Can you reliably tell, just from your feet, whether the water in your shower or bath is hot or cold? If that distinction has become blurry or vanished entirely, that is temperature sensation loss, and it is not something to brush aside. The risk here is direct and physical. I have seen patients burned by heating pads placed against numb feet, patients scalded in bath water they genuinely could not feel was too hot, skin damaged by hot pavement or sand in summer, with no discomfort at all to warn them until the damage was already done. The injury happened before any pain ever registered because the warning system simply isn't working anymore. What makes this sign particularly important is timing. It often shows up before significant visible numbness does, which means if your ability to sense temperature in your feet has changed, that alone is worth bringing to a specialist, even if none of your other symptoms feel dramatically worse. Sign 6. The nights that keep getting longer. Sign 6 isn't simply bad sleep. Most people living with neuropathy already deal with some level of nighttime disruption. What I'm actually watching for here is a specific pattern. Nighttime pain or discomfort that keeps intensifying even though your treatment plan hasn't changed. There's a real physiological reason neuropathy pain tends to spike at night. Your body's hormonal rhythms shift during sleep in ways that can amplify how pain is perceived. And on top of that, without the distractions of your day, that pain simply becomes harder to ignore. What matters is tracking the trend over time. Were you waking up from pain twice a week a year ago, and now it's happening every single night? Has the intensity increased even though nothing about your medication or treatment has changed? That kind of measurable nighttime deterioration is a genuine progression signal. It tells me the condition is moving faster than your current treatment plan can keep up with. There's another layer to this worth understanding. Disrupted sleep isn't just an inconvenience. Deep sleep is when your body runs its repair processes. When that cycle is consistently broken, it can interfere with how your body manages inflammation and how effectively your nervous system can recover it all. If your nighttime pain has clearly worsened over the past several months, that's not a sign to adjust your treatment slightly. It's a sign to have it fully reevaluated. Sign 7. When strength starts to go. The 7th and final sign tells me the nerve damage has crossed into entirely new territory. Most neuropathy, particularly in its earlier stages, is purely sensory, burning, tingling, numbness, while the motor system, responsible for movement and strength, stays relatively untouched. But when motor fibers finally become involved, everything changes. Watch for difficulty lifting the front of your foot as you walk, a condition known as foot drop. It often starts subtly, catching your toe on completely flat ground where there was nothing to trip on. A slightly heavier footstep on one side than the other. Weakness in the ankle when climbing stairs or stepping off a curb. Foot drop especially tend to start small, an occasional stumble here, a trip there, and most patients simply write it off as clumsiness or not paying attention. But when it starts happening regularly, on flat, even ground, that is not inattention. That is motor fiber involvement, and it requires a completely different evaluation approach than sensory-only neuropathy. The nerve damage has expanded its territory. If you've noticed any weakness in your feet, any difficulty lifting your foot while walking, or any change in how you control your foot, that conversation needs to happen with a specialist. Putting it all together, let's run through all 7 quickly. 1. Numbness climbing above the ankle. 2. Pain shifting from episodic to constant. 3. Changes in balance or walking. 4. Wounds that don't hurt or won't heal. 5. Loss of temperature sensation. 6. Nighttime pain worsening despite stable treatment. 7. Weakness or foot drop. Here is how I want you to actually use this list. This is not meant to frighten you. Nearly every one of these signs, when caught early, is far more manageable than people assume. The entire point of knowing them is simple. Earlier recognition leads to earlier conversations, and earlier conversations lead to more options on the table. Pay attention to the pattern, not just a single sign in isolation. One sign alone might mean very different things depending on the person. But if you're noticing 3 or more together, spreading numbness, some balance changes, and nighttime pain that's been steadily climbing, that combination is telling you something real. That pattern deserves a proper specialist evaluation, not a rush 15-minute mention during a routine checkup, where neuropathy is just one item on a long list. And I want to leave you with this. The most dangerous signs on this list are almost never the ones that hurt the most. They're the ones involving lost sensation, lost balance, lost temperature awareness, wounds forming completely without your knowledge. Those are the signs capable of leading to falls and serious injury long before someone even realizes how far things have progressed. If temperature sensation has changed, if a wound isn't healing the way it should, if any weakness has crept into your feet, those are findings that call for action, not observation. If you notice yourself nodding along to sign 5, that's often the first quiet clue of small fiber neuropathy, a form of nerve damage where standard nerve tests can come back completely normal, and patients are told nothing is wrong when something clearly is. I've covered that condition in full detail in another video, and I'll make sure it's easy to find. If this kind of clinical detail is what you come here for, no fluff, just a real clinical picture, make sure you're subscribed, because this is exactly what every video on this channel looks like. And before you go, I want to hear from you. Of these 7 signs, which ones have you personally noticed? Drop the numbers in the comments below. I read every single one, and it genuinely helps me decide what to cover next.